Thank you so much for joining us today for this chapter of Time-Hopping Hero, Ethan's First Leaps. We truly appreciate you taking the time to read along with us. Just a reminder that the English subtitles for this video are accurate, and YouTube offers some fantastic tools to enhance your learning. If needed, you can use the auto-translate function to view subtitles in your preferred language. You can also slow down the video playback speed if you'd like to listen more carefully. Thanks again for spending your valuable time with us. Enjoy the story. Time-Hopping Hero, Ethan's First Leaps. Copyright 2025. Chunking to Fluency. Chapter 6. The Long Shadow of Loss. The scene shifted, not in a blur of temporal travel, but in a gradual, observational jump forward, orchestrated by Ethan. The vibrant, hopeful Topeka of Walter's youth faded, replaced by a grittier, more subdued cityscape. The railway yards still hummed, but the optimistic swagger that had defined Walter Tipton was long gone. Weeks turned into months, then years, for Ethan and Billy in their hidden observation. They saw Walter drift, clinging to the edges of society, moving through a haze of alcohol, his once sharp mind dulled, his ambition replaced by a simmering resentment. He took on odd jobs, nothing sustained, a shadow of the man he once was. It was in a small, unassuming diner on the outskirts of Topeka, years after Clarabelle's death, that Walter Tipton met Martha. She was a waitress, quiet and unassuming, with kind, tired eyes that held a hint of resignation. Ethan and Billy watched as Walter, his face etched with premature lines, would come in regularly for coffee, his silence a heavy presence. Martha, ever diligent, would serve him without fuss, a small nod her only acknowledgement. There was no grand romance, no passionate declarations. It was a slow, weary gravitational pull of two solitary souls. Walter, broken and adrift, saw in Martha a quiet harbor, someone who asked no questions, demanded no explanations. Martha, perhaps seeing a flicker of the man Walter could have been, or simply seeking stability in her own life, seemed to accept him for what he was, a silent, troubled man. Their courtship was marked by a profound lack of joy, dominated by Walter's withdrawal. He rarely spoke of his past, especially of Clarabelle. Billy watched, a knot forming in his stomach, realizing that this was the root of his mother's distant knowledge and silence. Martha, through hushed whispers heard from old Topeka families, likely pieced together fragments of the story: the brilliant young man, the sudden, tragic loss, the subsequent downward spiral. But she learned, as many did in those circumstances, that probing only brought forth a flicker of Walter's temper, a deeper retreat into his private abyss. She chose silence, a coping mechanism that allowed them to coexist, but never truly connect. Their marriage, when it happened, was a quiet affair, devoid of celebration, more a practical arrangement than a union of heart. The years that followed painted a bleak picture of family life. Walter's drinking, once a desperate coping mechanism, became a stubborn habit. He never fully descended into public drunkenness, maintaining a tenuous grip on functionality, but the alcohol was his constant companion, numbing the persistent ache of Clarabelle's ghost. He worked, but without passion, providing for his family, but offering little else. His temper, brittle and unpredictable, was a direct consequence of his unaddressed pain. He lashed out at small annoyances, at perceived disrespect, at the world that had stolen his future. The warmth, the booming laugh Ethan had seen in Walter's youth was a distant memory. When Billy was born, there was a brief flicker of something softer in Walter's eyes, a fleeting moment of paternal pride. But the joy was quickly overshadowed by the persistent sorrow he carried. He was a presence in Billy's life, but an emotionally absent one, unable to give the love and guidance he himself had never processed after his devastating loss. The frustration, the anger, the unresolved grief that Walter had kept bottled up for so long became the invisible poison that permeated their small home. It wasn't always outright violence, but a constant undercurrent of tension, harsh words, and unpredictable outbursts. Billy grew up flinching, learning to navigate the volatile moods of a father whose deep well of pain remained a terrifying mystery. Ethan watched Billy's face as they observed these scenes from the past. Billy's eyes were wide, filled with a complex blend of recognition, profound sadness, and a growing understanding. He saw his own childhood playing out, but now he saw its roots, its tragic origins. The anger towards his father was still there, but it was now laced with a heartbreaking pity for the young man who had lost everything, and for the broken man he became. The realization that his father's cruelty wasn't born of inherent evil, but from an inability to cope with immense sorrow, was a devastating truth, but also a transformative one. Billy now knew what Ethan had meant. He didn't have to be him. He could choose to break the cycle, armed with the knowledge of where it began. The endless loop of Walter Tipton's broken life, played out across the silent canvas of the past, reached a point of saturation for Billy. He had seen enough. He had seen the radiant Clara Belle, the ambitious young man, the soul-shattering moment of loss, and the slow, agonizing descent into a bitterness that permeated every aspect of his father's subsequent life. He saw the quiet desperation in Martha's eyes, the unaddressed void that had become their family's unspoken truth. The why of his own childhood was laid bare, raw and painful, but finally comprehensible. "Ethan," Billy whispered, his voice hoarse, his gaze still fixed on a scene of a lonely, middle-aged Walter nursing a drink in a dimly lit bar. "I think I've seen enough." Ethan nodded, a profound sadness in his own heart, but also a deep sense of purpose fulfilled. This wasn't just information. It was a revelation, a gift of understanding that could hopefully change a future. He gently engaged the temporal relays, pulling them out of the past. The grainy filter dissolved, the muted sounds sharpened, and the familiar hum of the time machine roared to life, engulfing them in a rush of accelerating light before depositing them gently back into the quiet familiarity of Mr. Abernathy's workshop. The scent of dust and old books filled the air, a comforting reality after the visceral emotions of the past. Billy stumbled slightly as he exited the time machine, his legs feeling strangely weak. He didn't speak, didn't look at Ethan, but walked straight to Mr. Abernathy's worn armchair where the old man was stirring from a light doze. Billy sank onto the rug beside the chair, resting his head against the armrest, his shoulders still shaking with silent emotion. Mr. Abernathy, his eyes surprisingly clear, gently reached out a trembling hand and rested it on Billy's head, stroking his hair with a feather-light touch. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer platitudes. He simply understood. The three of them sat in the quiet of the workshop, bathed in the soft glow of the afternoon sun filtering through the dusty windows. The only sound, the rhythmic tick-tock of 100 clocks, marking time, past and present, now forever intertwined. For Billy, the world was irrevocably altered. The angry, unpredictable father of his present was no longer just a source of fear or resentment. He was a tragic figure, a man broken by an unspeakable sorrow he had never learned to process. The abuse was still wrong, still painful, but it now carried the crushing weight of its origin. He saw the layers of inherited pain, the legacy of a loss that had echoed through decades, shaping not just Walter, but Martha, and ultimately, himself. This new understanding didn't erase the past, but it offered a chance for a different future. Billy didn't know if he could ever truly forgive his father for the pain inflicted, but he understood the burden Walter carried. For the first time, Billy felt a glimmer of something beyond anger, a deep, aching pity, and perhaps a fragile hope that he, armed with this knowledge, could interrupt the cycle. He didn't have to carry that pain alone anymore. He didn't have to make other people feel what he felt. He had chosen, instead, to understand. And in that profound understanding lay the first tentative step towards a different kind of healing for the Tipton family. A healing that would begin with Billy. The end of Chapter 6.
Give it a like, will ya?
Chunk phrases of interest for Chapter 6. Number 1. To drift off. To drift off. This chunk phrase refers to the act of being carried along slowly by currents of air or water, or to move aimlessly without direction or purpose. Example: after the tragedy, Walter began to drift, losing his sense of purpose. After the tragedy, Walter began to drift, losing his sense of purpose. Number 2, the downward spiral. The downward spiral. This chunk phrase refers to a situation in which a problem or bad situation becomes progressively worse and is difficult to control. Example: his life became a downward spiral after the incident. His life became a downward spiral after the incident. Number 3, a coping mechanism. A coping mechanism. This chunk phrase refers to a strategy or behavior used by an individual to deal with or manage difficult emotions, stressful situations, or adverse experiences. Example: silence became Martha's coping mechanism in their marriage. Silence became Martha's coping mechanism in their marriage. Number 4. A stubborn habit. A stubborn habit. This chunk phrase refers to a persistent and hard-to-change behavior. Example: his drinking, initially a coping mechanism, became a stubborn habit. His drinking, initially a coping mechanism, became a stubborn habit. Number 5. His unpredictable temper. His unpredictable temper. This chunk phrase refers to a tendency for a person's anger or irritability to be sudden, inconsistent, and hard to anticipate. Example: Billy learned to navigate his father's unpredictable temper. Billy learned to navigate his father's unpredictable temper. Number 6. A distant memory. A distant memory. This chunk phrase refers to something from the past that is vague or hard to recall clearly. Example: the warmth of his youth became a distant memory. The warmth of his youth became a distant memory. Number 7. The unresolved grief. The unresolved grief. This chunk phrase refers to lingering, unaddressed sadness or mourning. Example: the unresolved grief shaped his entire adult life. The unresolved grief shaped his entire adult life. Number 8. To permeate his home. To permeate his home. This chunk phrase refers to a figurative expression meaning that something influential spread throughout and affected every part of his living environment or family life. Example: the unexpressed anger was a poison that permeated his home. The unexpressed anger was a poison that permeated his home. Number 9. The unpredictable outbursts. The unpredictable outbursts. This chunk phrase refers to sudden, uncontrolled emotional explosions. Example: Billy grew up flinching from his father's unpredictable outbursts. Billy grew up flinching from his father's unpredictable outbursts. Number 10. An inability to cope. An inability to cope. This chunk phrase refers to a lack of skill, strength, or emotional capacity to handle or manage difficult situations, stress, or challenges effectively. Example: his cruelty stemmed from an inability to cope with immense sorrow. His cruelty stemmed from an inability to cope with immense sorrow. Number 11. The endless loop. The endless loop. This chunk phrase refers to a repeated sequence or cycle that seems to have no end. Example: he was stuck in the endless loop of his broken past. He was stuck in the endless loop of his broken past. Number 12. A middle-aged man. A middle-aged man. This chunk phrase refers to a man typically considered to be in the age range of 40 to 60 years old. Example: Billy saw a lonely middle-aged man nursing a drink. Billy saw a lonely middle-aged man nursing a drink. Number 13. A rush of light. A rush of light. This chunk phrase refers to a sudden and rapid burst of light. Example, the time machine enveloped them in a rush of accelerating light. The time machine enveloped them in a rush of accelerating light. Number 14, on the armrest. On the armrest. This chunk phrase refers to a specific part of a piece of furniture positioned where a person can rest their arm. Example, Billy rested his head on the armrest of Mr. Abernathy's chair. Billy rested his head on the armrest of Mr. Abernathy's chair. The end of chunk phrases of interest for Chapter 6.
We hope that by listening to the story and reviewing the chunk phrases of interest, you've had a chance to increase your English vocabulary in an enjoyable way. If you enjoyed this chapter and want to continue your journey with Ethan and his time-hopping adventures, please subscribe to the Chunking to Fluency channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Feel free to share this video with anyone who might enjoy it or is learning English, and don't forget to give it a like. Finally, if you hit the notification bell icon, you'll be sure to know when the next chapter of time-hopping hero, Ethan's First Leaps, is released. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to sharing more stories with you soon. Be blessed.